Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody, and what a treat for you today. Joining myself and Mikey McCubbin, we have Premier League legend Jamie Carragher. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. Welcome to the Lowdown.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are grading every Premier League club's start to the season from A star to F. Jamie, feel free to be as brutal as you like on any side. Let's kick off with your former side, Liverpool. Could this season really have gone that much better for them so far?
No, I'm not sure it could have done. I mean, the disappointed what happened at the weekend. They've dropped points, I think 5 points at home now this season to Nottingham Forest and Fulham, and probably two teams they would normally expect to beat at home in most seasons. So I think because of that, I think it's A rather than A+. So I think we'll just go for an A for Liverpool.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think particularly in the Champions League, maybe an A star, but maybe in the league, an A. Mikey, next up, Chelsea.
Yeah, Chelsea. I guess this leads on to the point, actually. I think, like Liverpool, no one could have really seen where Chelsea would be at this season, or this stage of the season. I guess, is it between Maresca and Arne Slot for manager of the season right now? If Liverpool weren't where they are, do you feel like it's Maresca's year in that sense from a managerial point of view?
Yeah, I think they've been the two standout managers, and not just because the team winning. I don't think the manager of the year or the manager of this stage of the season should always be about whose team's top of the league. But you do look at the jobs both men have done. Arne Slot coming in after Jurgen Klopp, people thought the wheels might fall off a little bit. Maresca coming into the season after a really poor pre-season. Not much expectation really, even though they obviously spent a lot of money, got a lot of good players. The start against City. So yeah, I think both managers done brilliant jobs, so far. But what would we give Chelsea? I think A-, B+, probably. They lost to Newcastle, didn't they? A Carabao Cup. Obviously in the Conference League, aren't they? In Europe, so it's not too demanding that. A-.
Okay.
A- for Chelsea.
Right, we'll go to Arsenal next. What do you think is the biggest reason behind their drop-off this season? Do you think it's recruitment? Do you think it's the injuries? Martin Odegaard, of course, missing those crucial games. Do you think it's the tactics? Mikel Arteta maybe being too defensive? So what's your answer to that, and where would you grade them?
I've always felt, when I get asked at the start of every season, when I speak about Arsenal, I've never backed them to win the title. And the reason being, I've always felt they were an attacker short, a world-class player. People always say, they need a striker. I don't necessarily think it's a striker. I think on that left-hand side, they need an upgrade in what they've got now, whether that's Martinelli or Trossard and Havertz up front. So you think of those three players in two positions, they need something more than that, whether that's through the middle or wide left. So that's why I've always been a little bit reticent to say I think they'll win the league at the start of a season. I think tactically they've had problems injury-wise and with sendings off, which hasn't helped. They've, of course, would have got more points without those red cards. But there's definitely something missing at the moment. And I think they'll be looking at, especially Liverpool, and be thinking, that's where we were supposed to be. If City drop off, we were supposed to be the team who take advantage of that. But listen, there's still a long way to go. But it needs to change pretty quickly, or they're going to give themselves too much to do. So I would say Arsenal.
A C, are we thinking?
I was going to say C. Am I being a bit too harsh? Probably C+. C+.
Yeah, I don't think that's harsh at all. I mean, I guess, now that we're on the title race here, if Arsenal were to finish third this season behind Chelsea and Liverpool,
it's a bad season.
Do you think that would mark a bit of a, I don't know whether it'd be harsh to say a failure, but do you think in terms of, this kind of 5-year project that, under Arteta and Edu, who's obviously left the club now, but would that be deemed as a failure given the money that was spent, given the fact that, Chelsea and Liverpool, especially, Liverpool in the post-Klopp era, Chelsea, where they were last season, overtaking them in this manner in a down season for City. Do you think you would class it as a failure?
Yeah, I think they would. I think there'd be a lot of real negativity around Arsenal, around the supporters. I think there'd be a real disappointment. And I think they would go into next season with all eyes and real pressure on Mikel Arteta, because it gets to a stage when you've been at a job so long, even though he's done a brilliant job, Mikel Arteta, fantastic since he come in. You've got to feel like you're going somewhere, and as soon as you feel like you're actually going backwards or going the other way, before you know, you'd be trying to get someone else. That's just the nature of football. You always, with Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, it was like every season getting closer, and then you get there. If Arsenal sort of go from being second to being third, and City have had a drop off, that almost feels like a backward step then. So it'd be probably a lot to turn that round in the following season.
Yeah, absolutely. Doogie?
On to Forest.
On to Forest, yeah. So fourth place, 28 points now. I mean, above Man City, having played the same amount of games. I mean, who's impressed you the most at Forest this season? And yeah, what would your score be?
Who's impressed me? I mean, you just look at Chris Wood getting the goals, but the two centre-backs are outstanding, really good defensively. But the manager as well, he's a really experienced, proven Premier League manager at that type of club. I know he found it difficult at Tottenham, and I'm not sure he does suit one of the bigger jobs because, he has a certain way of playing. He makes it difficult for the opposition, good defensively, strong on set pieces. But when you talk about grading them, it has to be A+, doesn't it? I think most people would have been looking at Forest thinking they'd be struggling, maybe down the bottom. But the position they find themselves in is probably one of the biggest success story in the Premier League this season.
Our first A+ of the show.
Yes.
Well deserved. Forest, right. I don't think this team will be getting an A+. Man City, currently in 5th. I think the lowest place most people would have had them was probably 2nd before a ball was kicked. Is this an end of an era, Jamie?
Yeah, I think it looks like that. It looks like it needs a rebuild with Pep. And what's happened is they basically got older together. But what's happened is the last couple of seasons of transfers that they brought in, even though they're still winning, they're winning because a certain group of players are still winning. And when these players are asked to do a little bit more, they're not quite good enough. So you go to sort of, Doku coming in a couple of years ago. You're going to, Calvin Phillips a couple of years ago. Nunes coming in. Even though Jack Grealish was part of the treble-winning season, it's just you need to kick on individually in terms of his numbers. So these players that they've bought over the last sort of 2 seasons, where you'd be thinking they should be coming to the fore now, they're not ready to replace these older players of maybe like Kevin De Bruyne or Silva. Rodri's out injured. And they've been left a little bit short because the transfer business hasn't been good enough. So, wow, what do you go with Man City? I think you could even go D-.
Wow.
Maybe. Yeah. No one could have said...
Against their level, you could even go lower.
I know, but yeah, you could probably, Let's give them an F+.
Yeah.
Wow. Dougie, you were pushing that there.
Yeah.
I mean, the last month...
I missed the out. I forgot the alphabet then. Did I go straight to F? No, I don't think we can go to F with Man City. Let's give them an E+.
E+. Okay, fair enough. Mikey, Villa?
Villa, yeah. I mean... I guess Villa's been a bit weird one because they set themselves such high standards last year. Unai Emery's been juggling Champions League football as well, and they've given a decent account of themselves there. So yeah, those things considered, what have you made of Villa's season?
I think they'd be disappointed. I think we all know the Champions League was maybe going to hinder them a little bit, but it's really dropped off. And I think this is a little bit more than just this Champions League talk. Really, I've expected a bit more for them in the league games of late. And I think they'd be disappointed, what they've done points-wise this season, the games that they've lost. So I would go C-.
Okay. Yeah,
for Aston Villa, yeah.
And I guess looking to the future, John Duran, of course, has been a bit of a breakout star this season. Ollie Watkins, at least in terms of his finishing, has dropped off a little bit. Do you think there's a decision to be made there by the club in the long term about who's going to be their starting forward and whether they... Yeah,
it doesn't look like he can get the two of them in. To be honest... I was just thinking Premier League there. They're doing really well in the Champions League, so maybe I should revise that, and that should be maybe more of a C+. Did I say C-?
C-, yeah.
Let's give them a C+. Sorry, okay. I forgot. At one stage, I think they were top of the Champions League group, and they look like they're going really well in that competition. So, yeah, I'll bump them up a little bit higher, but I think they want to get it back on track really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to Bournemouth. And as a fan of a smaller club, I always find this quite frustrating, but here I go asking the question anyway. Andoni Iraola is doing a brilliant job there. Do you think he has top 6 capabilities in terms of management? Yes,
because when we come in over Monday Night Football, we always look at all the stats, the underlying numbers, and sometimes there'll be a team who are doing really well in the season, but their underlying numbers tell you that maybe it won't be the same next season. So you think of like a few seasons ago under Burnley, under Sean Dyche, finished 7th, but when you looked at the numbers behind it, maybe a bit of good fortune, still a great season for, and you thought, well, they'll drop back to where they should be next season. Sheffield United did something similar when they came up with Chris Wilder. I can't remember exactly where they finished, but they had a really good season.
8th or 9th or something.
Yeah, but the numbers behind it weren't great. Bournemouth's underlying numbers show they should be where they are and actually should be doing better than what they're actually doing. So you're thinking, hang on, this is sustainable. You've just mentioned about him doing a top 6 club. I think they'd be looking at those numbers actually more than the points on the table and their actual games that they're winning, because they're actually saying this guy could come here and do this. He's doing this with Bournemouth, so he could do it. So for me, when I look at Bournemouth again, they're at least an A, maybe A plus, because of the numbers that we're looking at behind it. All the XGs and XG against and all that. This is a top job what this manager's doing right now. I'll give them an A.
A lot of players that are of similar age getting better incrementally week on week as well. It's really, really impressive. Mikey?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly before we move on, Milos Kerkez, of course, has had a lot of hype around him recently. Great performances from him. Brought to Bournemouth by Richard Hughes. Could you see Liverpool making a move for him with that left-back position?
Yeah, I mean, I think left-back is definitely an area that Liverpool should be looking to strengthen in January. Andy Robertson needs help. He's a Liverpool legend. He's won the lot. But certainly the amount of games he's played, playing in a Jurgen Klopp team, constantly just run up and down that wing for 5 or 6 years, he needs a little bit of help in that position. So I definitely think that is the one area that Liverpool should be looking to address in January. Obviously, Richard Hughes must know that player really well and really likes him. I'm sure he'll know his contract situation, seeing as he probably did the contract for him. So it might be one to keep an eye out on. But I think that's where Liverpool didn't do too much business in the summer, but that's an area that they have to rectify in January rather than wait until next summer.
Yeah, Mikey was touting Anthony Robinson last week as well, which I think
was.
Well, he was brilliant against Liverpool at the weekend. He's another one, yeah.
Speaking then, Mikey, Fulham.
Yeah, Fulham. I mean, obviously, got that draw against Liverpool on the weekend. I mean, what do you make of Fulham? And similarly to Araola as well, Marco Silva's a manager who, this season has really stood out tactically.
I think I'm a massive fan of Marco Silva. I always feel, when there was all that chopping and changing at Everton, that was the one Moshiri should have stuck with and given more time to. He was the one, I could understand the other ones, made a lot of bad decisions at Everton in terms of who they brought in, but I think he's a proper coach. His teams have a nice balance between playing football but not overplaying and putting themselves in trouble. Yeah, I think he's a top manager and a top job again this season, and I would go B+.
Let's move down to Spurs. I mean, only Chelsea have scored more goals than them, and only Liverpool and Chelsea have a better goal difference. Do you think they're actually a little bit unfortunate to be in the position they are, 10th as we record this, or do you think there is a bit of a long-term issue there?
I mean, they probably are a little bit unfortunate to be 10th, because when you look at their underlying numbers, that one of the best attacking teams in the league. Defensively, they're not too bad either. But they just have it in them to implode in games, and that's something that the manager has to fix. That can't continue. So I think there are things to like, to enjoy. I mean, they're the most entertaining team in the league. You're never quite sure what's going to happen. They could be absolutely amazing, or they could get, battered at any stage of the game. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. So I love watching them, love commentating on them. But I would say C+.
Mikey, Brentford?
I just realised we've actually missed out Brighton here in 9th.
Oh, so you're going to get the blame for that. You're going to get the blame.
Sorry,
that was Dougie's fault.
Do you want to go to Brighton next?
Yeah, let's go Brighton. I guess, again, like another manager who has impressed massively, Hertzler. I mean, I guess we speak about, Arne Slot and Maresca's start to the Premier League, but Hertzler at 31 years of age, how impressed have you been with him?
Very impressed. And, starts with that, big game, first game of the season, I should say, away at Everton. Now, if you're a young manager, first game of your Premier League season, now, you can go to tougher places than Goodison, but it's a real eye-opener, isn't it? The type of football Sean Dyche is going to play, really tight pitch. Everton's first game of the season, last season at Goodison, and they go there and win, I think, 3-0. And you think, that felt like one of those results on the first day of the season that just jumped out at you. And he's done really well. I mean, he's dropped off a little bit of late, but I think we're still waiting for this drop off for Brighton a little bit, because they've changed managers, but they've kept it going. It just shows, how well that club's run. But for a young man like that, he's made a real impression. Yeah,
and I guess it's always a question with Brighton. Who do you feel like is going to be the next young player who gets that 50 million pound plus move to a top club?
What's that? Is it, how do you say,
Belabor?
Yeah, he looks. I really like the look of him in midfield. He's really impressed me this season. He made a big impact. I think he came off the bench. I think in the Man City game, I think he came off the bench. But yeah, he's the one that I look at and impresses me. I looked at Minter at the start of the season, one to watch actually, but he's had a few injury problems, but he scored a good goal at Leicester a couple of weeks ago, so he might be one to keep an eye out on as well.
Nice. And a grade for Brighton?
I would say B.
Right, we're down to 11th now because we did Spurs before. Brian Mbeumo is someone that has been talked about as a Salah replacement. We've seen Antoine Semenyo talked about as a Salah replacement as well. If Salah was to hypothetically leave in the summer, do you see a player from a, no disrespect to their mid-table Premier League club being used? Or do you think Liverpool will be, looking for a superstar like a Michael Olise from Bayern trying to get, or like a Rodrigo from Real Madrid? Who do you think they'd go for?
I think Liverpool's model is, they go for those players a little bit under the radar. It's not about, Liverpool might lose Mo Salah, let's go and buy a superstar for 120 million. I don't think that would be the case, but obviously they want a quality player, but they'd be looking at the next upcoming thing, someone who was around the age of 23, 24, getting really good numbers with scope to improve. I think the problem with Mbeumo is he's really this season overperformed his XG. So in some ways, sometimes I think that's a little bit of a worry. When I think of how Liverpool look at players, if someone's really overperforming those type of numbers, there's going to be a regression there, at some stage, and they'll go back to the norm. So, but again, you mentioned Richie Hughes before. He's going to know where Semenyo really well, isn't he? So that might be one to keep an eye out on.
And Brentford as a whole, it feels like they've got a plan in every game. I know it doesn't necessarily go their way, particularly away from home this season. But Brentford as a whole have been very impressive again, haven't they? Yeah,
I mean, the home record's unbelievable. I think a couple of weeks ago they were the highest scorers in the league, and you think they've lost, Tony. And people talk about losing a big player. Well, he was their Mo Salah, if you like, or Kevin De Bruyne, where he was at Man City. And it hasn't really affected them, certainly goal-wise. So that's credit to the manager as well. But Brentford, I would go B- because their away record's so poor. B-.
Fair enough.
Interesting.
Mikey,
Newcastle. This is an interesting one, I think. Obviously, we got that big win over Leicester on the weekend, but that was their first win in 5 games. And also, I guess we speak about the likes of Brentford and Fulham and Bournemouth. Does it feel like Newcastle have been caught up to a little bit, not just in terms of performances, but in terms of like the quality of squad?
Yeah, well, they had a really poor window. It was well documented, between the new sporting director and Eddie Howe. They didn't get the centre back in who they wanted, and it's been really stop-start with Newcastle. They've had some great games at home. You think about how they played against Liverpool and Manchester City, beat Arsenal as well, but it's almost like when they play teams that are expected to beat, or maybe it's not that really big atmosphere in the game. They're not the same team. So I think on the whole, Newcastle will be probably slightly disappointed with how the season's gone. So I would say C for Newcastle.
I think that's fair.
You've said that on everyone I've ever said.
Well, I get a lot of stick. I get a lot of stick on Twitter for calling out Newcastle for not having a particularly good season, but I just think they have been really, really disappointing. And I think it comes back to like recruitment over the last few years. How do they still need a right winger? It honestly baffles me. Yeah. Honestly baffles me. Right, Man United in 13th.
Here we go.
Crazy. I suppose the big talking point with Man United at the moment is the fact they don't seem to have that many funds available to strengthen the squad. It feels like January is going to be about players leaving. Is it now the end of Marcus Rashford at Man United? Do you see any other huge names leaving Man United this January?
I think it'd be difficult to move players on. You mentioned Rashford. I don't know who's going to take his wages on. That's not going to happen. Maybe something in the summer where him and the club come to some sort of deal, because I do feel the time is up for Marcus at Manchester United right now. It's a new manager, it's a new regime. He's obviously left him out of the Manchester derby.
Do you think the system doesn't necessarily fit his
skills?
Not
particularly,
either?
No. I don't see him as the centre forward. He doesn't particularly look like he's wanted to ever play that position. He's not one of the number 10s because he's going to end up with his back to play a lot. So, it just doesn't suit him at all. There's no way he could do wing back. And if I'm being honest, I've always had this feeling with Marcus Rashford. He's a good Premier League player. He's had a couple of seasons where he's looked like a very good one. But in the main, we talk about Marcus Rashford too much. He's not good enough as a player for the amount of
airtime that he gets.
Yeah, that's basically it. He's a good player, and that's it. And Manchester United have had some good seasons out of him. He's been there, a local lad come through, and it's run its course, and it's time for him to do something new and something fresh.
And as a club, are you going D, E, F, I assume?
I think probably D-, E. No, I think it's probably E, isn't it? I mean, where are they in the league again?
13th.
It's unbelievable. I mean,
they're on track
Jesus
for 52
Christ.
points.
Yeah. I mean, F. Yeah. I mean, how can Man United be 13th in the Premier League and they still spent 180 million in the summer on the back of the hundreds of millions that they spent before? I mean, the new manager's come in, he seems like a decent enough guy, he speaks well, and press comes, he won some big games, beaten Pep, hasn't he, twice in the last month or so, obviously once with Sporting Lisbon. But But no, to be 13th in the league, it's just, I mean, that just can't happen.
It's certainly giving Mikey sleepless nights.
Absolutely. I mean, also, I guess, Dan Ashworth's departure as well, big news. Does that feed into where Man United are at this season as well? That, such a big figure who came into the club has already left, under a bit of a cloud, it seems.
The optics aren't great. It looks messy. But I remember at Liverpool, we had a situation where our sporting director was giving us marching orders, Damien Comolli, at a really strange time. It was the day before we were playing in an FA Cup semi-final against Everton in April. He left his job. But it was the making of the new regime at Liverpool in terms of Michael Edwards having more power and more control. So, listen, they've made the decision because when they've come in, they've looked at how it's running, who does what, and if they think we'll only know in the future if it was the right decision. But I've always felt, what do all these people do at Man United? Barada, Ashworth, Brailsford, Wilcox. It did feel like there was too many. For me, it felt like one had to go eventually. It was just happened really quickly. But it might be the making of Manchester United.
Yeah, true. And I guess before we move on quickly, you mentioned Marcus Rashford there in terms of Amorim's kind of approach to leaving out players who he doesn't think are performing in training. Do you feel like, I feel like the general consensus is that he was right to leave out Garnacho and Rashford, and he made good reasoning for it. But do you think the public nature of him explaining why, do you think that's a bit of a risk on Amorim's part to kind of call out players publicly so early on?
No, well, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what you've seen or what quotes you've seen, but the interviews I saw, I thought he was just saying, no, I just picked that team. And he didn't really say, Marcus Rashford hasn't done this for training or Garnacho. Really, I thought he just played it quite cool. That little wry smile on his face where it was a bit like, well, you know what I really mean. But I don't think he was too critical of them at all. And I think sometimes we get a bit too hung up on managers being critical of players. Managers should be able to say if someone hasn't played well or their attitude's not right. That's not calling someone out. I mean, you're not asking a lot, are you? For guys playing football to turn up to train every day and actually have a go and give 100% in training. So, no, I wouldn't have any worries with that, no.
Okay, we've got West Ham next in 14th. Travel to Bournemouth tonight, which you can watch on Monday Night Football. Although, by the time this goes out, that's a very silly thing to say because you've already seen it. But either way, they are rated as the 15th best side in the division this year by expected points. It was supposed to be this brand new Lopetegui era. I think I can say it, probably create more headlines for you said it, but Lopetegui sacking feels quite inevitable. Do you see the manager that they are most strongly linked to is Graham Potter? Does that just feel like a good fit?
Well, it feels like a good fit in terms of where people were saying West Ham wanted to take their game to, because Lopetegui isn't that manager. I've said this before, it felt to me like West Ham wanted their De Zerbi, and Lopetegui isn't that. He's not. And I'm with you, I'm not sure it could have gone much worse, really. Monday Night Football games have actually probably saved Lopetegui in some ways. But I'm probably saying every time, and it's not just losing games, it's how they lose badly. And as I said, I think they've had a couple of wins, so they're not quite with the bottom 5 or 6 teams in terms of the relegation zone, which maybe stops me giving them an F. But I've been so unimpressed by them whenever I've seen them play. They throw the towel in at times in games. So I'm going to go E.
One of the biggest net spends not only in the Premier League but in the entirety of Europe as well. Mikey, Palace.
I mean, I guess
great run of form recently.
Yeah, good run of form recently. Obviously struggled at the start of the season. End of last season we were talking about Glasner as pretty much the best. He was the most informed manager in the league. But what have you made of Palace this season? Are you worried about them at all? Do you think this kind of defensive solidity that they found recently?
I was worried for them at one stage a few weeks ago. It didn't feel like anything was really happening. It didn't look like you could get a goal, but just picked up of late, and they always seem to find a way, Crystal Palace, don't they? Every season you think they're in trouble and they find a way of getting out of it. I would go C. I guess
the Elise, departure.
I think the players that they've lost, but I do think on the back of last season, I think Palace supporters coming into this season were a little bit excited and that enthusiasm. The manager's new system. We've got this manager who was a sought-after manager around Europe, and I think the start of the season just knocked them a bit. Where it's like, oh, this guy isn't some unbelievable tactical genius who can just go and beat the biggest teams as he was doing last season. He went to Anfield and won at the end of last season. So I think they just picked up of late. So I think they'll be looking at where they are midway through the season thinking, okay, we're back on track a little bit. We want to see a little bit of what we saw last season in the second half of the season.
Let's move on to Everton. You'll be very tuned into this, being from Liverpool. What is the mood in the Everton fan base right now? You know, they've got this new stadium, new owners coming in. Is it Dyche, similar to Lopetegui? Is that inevitable that he'll leave? Do they want him to go? What's sort of Everton feeling?
I think the feeling with Sean Dyche and Everton supporters is there's a respect there for the job that he's done. You know, when you take all the emotion out of a bad result or performance, you know, he kept them in the division when he came in. Last season, without the points deduction, I think Everton would have actually finished above Brighton. Would have actually finished about 13th to 14th. But this season, they've gone back to sort of fighting relegation. And I think it's been a poor season for Everton so far. And I would probably be giving them a D in that sense. And I don't think there's any chance whatsoever, and there shouldn't be, of Sean Dyche not managing Everton this season. He will keep them up. He knows what he's doing. He'll get enough clean sheets. He'll get enough wins at home at Goodison to keep them in the division. But I do think with new owners and the new stadium, I do think Everton will probably go for a new manager next, because Sean Dyche's contract runs out in the summer anyway. So I think Sean Dyche will keep Everton in the Premier League, and he will leave at the end of the season.
A D for Dyche and Everton. Mikey, Leicester.
Yeah, Leicester. I mean, again, Ruud van Nistelrooy, I guess, yeah. Honeymoon period over just about after the weekend. Do you think Leicester were right to replace Steve Cooper with Ruud van Nistelrooy, or even get rid of Steve Cooper in the first place? Because he had a tough job on his hands, didn't he?
He did, and I don't know how much the Nottingham Forest Leicester thing maybe doesn't help in terms of coming in as the new manager. But I thought it was a little bit harsh in the fact that Leicester were actually outside the relegation zone when he lost his job. Now, you do look at the three promoted teams now and think, They do look like the three teams who if I was saying right now who I think will go down would be maybe, obviously Wolves are in there as well. Ipswich are looking okay. But the worrying thing with Ruud van Nistelrooy's Leicester is they've got points on the board, which is obviously a huge help, but their underlying numbers behind those are really, really bad. We were looking at it Monday Night Football this morning, and they give a lot of big chances. Even when they beat West Ham had like, I think 20, 30 shots in the game. 30, I think, yeah, you know, just something. And Newcastle had something similar, and Leicester got beat heavily. If that doesn't change, they're going to get a lot of big defeats. And I worry more for Leicester now than I did when Steve Cooper was in charge. Even though Leicester have still, you know, picked up 4 points, I think out the first maybe 9 with Ruud van Nistelrooy first 3 games. I look at sort of how they're playing, and I'm worried for them.
Is that because of Van Nistelrooy being more of an unknown quantity in the Premier League than Steve Cooper, who we saw?
No, just looking at their underlying numbers. Yeah. I mean, their XG against is off the scale in the 3 games he's been in charge of, and I know he's got 4 points, but if that continues, they'll take a lot of heavy beatings.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, not that much pace in their backline is the thing I'd say with their centre backs.
Did we get a score there? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Leicester. I would say C-.
C-. Okay, let's move on to Ipswich. Framing this as more of a positive, actually, because Leif Davis and I think Liam Delap have been really impressive. Do you think Tuchel will be considering them for England? Yeah,
I do, because they are definitely positions that you look at and you're not quite sure now at left back for England whose role that is. Centre forward, you've got Harry Kane, but after him you've got Ollie Watkins, you know, really good Premier League striker, but I wouldn't say absolute elite. And Harry's obviously getting to that stage of his career where people are going to start probably questioning him. Should he be in the team? Should he not? So you're thinking, who's the next batch and generation of strikers? And he is a handful. He is one of them ones who you think, I wouldn't want to play against him every week. Whether he'll have, in the end, have the maybe the finesse or class that you need to be England striker, we'll see. But he certainly looks a rough diamond.
Love it. And grade for them?
I think Ipswich could be a B. I think we'd expect them to be where they were, but they've had a couple of wins. You know, they've big win away at Tottenham, caused, you know, should have beat Manchester United at home, caused Liverpool problems first game of the season. So I think where Ipswich are right now, I think they'll be pretty, you know, say, okay, you know, we'll take that.
Yeah, after a double promotion as well.
Yeah. So Wolves next. Just very quickly, you gave Ipswich a B. I remember you gave Brentford a B-. Do you feel like that's harsh in retrospect, given where they're at, given Brentford's home form this season as well? Would you be wanting to stick with that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think I class Brentford as a mid-table Premier League club, if I'm being honest. You know, and that's probably where they are in the season right now. And they would have got high, but their away record's so poor. But no, I'd stick with that. Yeah. I think a fear, and it happened last season, was that when Luton came up and Ipswich came up, because they'd had the double promotions, Ipswich, that they're not ready for the Premier League. And where Southampton find themselves in, there might have been a fear that could be Ipswich, because they're actually coming up with a championship squad and they're not ready for the Premier League. So actually the fact that they've been really competitive in the league and they've had a couple of players who really stand out, I think it's been really, really positive for them.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess maybe we can go to Southampton, seeing as you mentioned them there, and then go back to Wolves in 19th. Russell Martin's just been sacked. Do you think they need to desperately change their style in order to stay up in the Premier League? Do you think that's where the thinking's come from? And if so, do you think it's too late for Southampton? Do you think they should have made that decision a month or two ago?
Maybe, but I think it's fair when a manager's brought you up to give them 15 games. Yeah. I think that's only fair. I think it's too late in terms of them actually staying up. There's a points gap now. The Maroons at the bottom, and I don't think they've got the quality, really. Tyler Dibblin is a really good player, but there's not much else around him in terms of going forward. Because when you even look at Wolves, you've got Cunha. He is a player who can get you out of trouble. I'm not sure Southampton have got enough players, but the days of football being, you have a Russell Martin style of football, then you go and get Tony Pulis or Sam Allardyce to keep it up. I don't think that happens now, really. But there should be a little bit of a shift. Not massively away from Russell Martin. It's because they brought certain players in to do a certain type of football and play. But it's not even the football they play. They just put themselves in trouble so many times in certain situations.
They kept one clean sheet.
Yeah, so, I watched them against Liverpool. They can see the goal against Liverpool. When Liverpool have had them under pressure for 4 or 5 minutes, the goalie gets the ball. Everybody's in the box, and he throws the ball out to someone on the edge of the box. Liverpool win it back, and Szoboszlai scores. Now, you can still play good football in the game, but not do things like that. That's what they need to stop doing. They make so many defensive errors. And listen, who knows what goes on behind the scenes in the dressing room with the manager? Is he encouraging the goalkeeper to throw it? I can't believe he would be, but there's certain things they can cut out of their game. They don't have to be a long ball team. They don't have to be really negative. But the stupid mistakes that players make individually, has to change.
Fair. And finally, let's go to Wolves.
Sorry,
did you get Southampton? Sorry.
Southampton. I would say D-.
My question about Wolves was going to be, it looks like Victor Pereira, as we record this on Monday, 12:51, is going to be then a new manager. But actually, I'm more interested in your thoughts on Gary O'Neill, because I know he came on Monday Night Football last year. I thought he was really impressive. He did a great job at Bournemouth. He did a great job at Wolves last year, considering how soon before the start of the season he took over. Is he a Premier League level manager? Do you think he'll get back into the Premier League very quickly? Because it felt like he's been given a pretty rough hand, I'd say, this year with his squad.
Well, he's proven he's a Premier League manager. He did a great job last season keeping them up. Did brilliantly keeping Bournemouth up as well. But they've just lost too many players of real quality. You think of Kilman and Neto this summer, last summer, that's just gone as well. And they haven't got the quality there. Really, certainly defensively. I mean, when you're still going to Dawson to play at centre back, I mean, he's been a really good Premier League centre back, but he's 34, 35 now.
That, yeah.
And it's just too much for him. And they just haven't recruited well enough in that area or give him the funds that he needs to go and bring players in there. I think one of the centre backs got a cruciate knee injury as well, which doesn't help. So I feel for him a little bit, to be honest. But if you're in the bottom three at this stage of the season, people are going to pull the trigger, aren't they? That's, Gary O'Neill knows that. And but I think on his time, when you look at what he's done, his body of work at Wolves, including last season, he's done a decent job. And I think, listen, he might have to go to the top of the Championship and bring a team back into the Premier League. But I think we'll see Gary O'Neill in the Premier League in another time.
Nice. And grade for Wolves before we finish?
D+.
There we have it. Guys, that has been the Lowdown for this week. Massive, massive thank you to Jamie Carragher for coming on the Lowdown. Still can't quite believe that happened. Off he goes to hang out with Thierry Henry after the Lowdown. Thank you so much, Jamie, and we'll catch you guys soon. Stay tuned. Make sure you leave your comments and your reviews about everyone's season so far, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.